The air in the school hallway was heavy with that stale mixture of floor polish and cafeteria grease, the kind of scent you only notice when silence hangs too sharp. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, their flicker echoing in the stillness. The bell had already rung, and students had disappeared into classrooms, leaving only the faint shuffle of a janitor down the hall. At the far end stood Kiana, a 15-year-old black girl with soft braids pulled neatly into a bun, clutching her books tightly against her chest, as if they were armor. Her sneakers squeaked on the linoleum floor as she turned the corner, hoping no one noticed she was late again. But someone did. Officer Barnes leaned against the wall outside the main office, one hand resting casually on the baton at his hip, the other drumming impatiently against the radio clipped to his chest. His uniform seemed sharper than the man himself, the creases in his trousers so precise they could cut, the badge gleaming under the light. His face, however, wore a permanent sneer, lips curled like he was always smelling something foul. "Kiana Johnson," he drawled, his voice deep, deliberate, carrying that tone adults sometimes use when they've already decided you're guilty. Kiana froze, her breath catching in her throat. She tried to make herself smaller, gripping her books tighter, mumbling, "Yes, sir. You think rules don't apply to you?" Barnes stepped forward, his boots striking the tile with exaggerated force. "Tardy again, that's what? Third time this month?" Her cheeks burned, though not from guilt. She had been late because she had to walk her little brother to school that morning. Her mom had left early for work at the federal building downtown, a job Kiana didn't fully understand, except that it was important. But excuses never mattered to men like Barnes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The officer's eyes narrowed, and in an instant the apology seemed to ignite something inside him, an anger that had been waiting for a target. He moved closer, towering over her, his breath laced with coffee and bitterness. "Sorry?" he spat. "You think sorry means anything when you people keep breaking the rules?" The words landed like a slap, sharper than the echoing hallway. "You people!" She had heard it before, whispered behind her back, printed between the lines of stares, but here it was raw, unfiltered. Kiana shifted her weight, wanting to run, but frozen by fear. And then it happened, so sudden it barely felt real. Barnes shoved his boot forward, striking her shin with a sharp kick that sent her stumbling against the lockers. Her books scattered, pages fluttering to the floor like wounded birds. The sound of the impact echoed, and for a moment, silence fell heavier than before. Kiana gasped, pain flaring through her leg, eyes wide with disbelief. This wasn't just discipline. This was something darker, humiliation delivered in steel-toed leather. And then his words came, low and venomous. "Maybe next time, you'll learn to stay in your place." She blinked rapidly, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might burst. The hallway swam in her vision, a mix of shame, pain, and rage swirling inside her chest. She wanted to scream, to fight back, but fear wrapped around her throat like a hand squeezing shut. What neither of them realized, however, was that someone else had just entered the building. The front doors swung open with a controlled force, and heels clicked against the polished floor, not rushed, but purposeful, the kind of walk that carried authority. And it belonged to her mother. Monica Johnson had just returned from an unannounced morning meeting, dressed in her tailored navy suit, her hair pulled into a flawless bun that matched the no-nonsense sharpness of her eyes. What no one at the school fully knew was that Monica wasn't just an overworked single mom. She was also a high-ranking Secret Service agent, sworn to protect lives at the highest level of government. And now, She was about to protect her daughter. Monica's footsteps echoed through the hallway, sharp and steady, each click of her heels sounding like a countdown. Her presence filled the space before her voice ever did. Barnes stiffened instinctively at the sound, like a soldier caught in inspection, but when he turned, his expression barely shifted, that smug smirk returning as though authority was his birthright. Kiana was still crouched on the floor, fumbling to gather her scattered books, her fingers trembling as she tried to hide her tears. Monica's eyes, sharp and unblinking, locked on her daughter first, and in that single glance she understood. The wince on Kiana's face, the way her hand cradled her shin, the way shame clung to her like a shadow. Monica didn't need words. She knew something had happened. Something ugly. "Is there a problem here?" Monica's voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that masks a storm. Barnes straightened his shoulders, tugging at his belt as if the weight of his badge made him taller. "Just handling school discipline, ma'am. Your daughter was late again. Needed a reminder about following rules." "Rules," Monica repeated, her tone cold. Her heels clicked closer, each step deliberate, until she stood between him and Kiana. She crouched slowly, her tailored suit creasing as she knelt to meet her daughter's eyes. "Baby, are you okay?" Kiana bit her lip, hesitating. She wanted to be strong, to not cry in front of him, but her mother's presence cracked something open. Her voice broke into a whisper. "He kicked me, Mom." The words cut sharper than any blade. Monica's jaw tightened, the muscles in her face locking as she stood back up, now eye to eye with Barnes. For a moment, the hallway felt smaller, the buzzing lights overhead dimmer, as if everything paused to watch this collision unfold. Barnes scoffed, his smirk widening. "Exaggerating. Kids these days, always playing the victim. I barely touched her." Monica tilted her head, her gaze steady. "Barely touched her?" She took a single step closer, her voice low enough to make him lean in to hear it. "That girl you just put your hands on is mine, and you just made the biggest mistake of your career." The air tightened. Barnes shifted, suddenly less certain, but still puffed with arrogance. "Listen, lady." "Agent Johnson," she cut in, flashing her credentials so fast it was like a gun being drawn. The black leather case snapped open, the gold emblem of the United States Secret Service gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Barnes froze. His smirk faltered. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. From down the hallway, the principal's door creaked open. A balding man with nervous eyes poked his head out, adjusting his tie like he was already sweating. "Officer Barnes? Is everything okay out here?" Monica turned her head slightly, her eyes never leaving Barnes. "No, everything is not okay. Your officer here thinks it's acceptable to assault a child in your school hallways. My child." The principal stepped out fully now, his face blanching as he caught sight of Monica's badge. "Mrs. Johnson, Agent Johnson, let's take this inside, please. I'm sure we can de-escalate." "There is no de-escalating this," Monica said flatly, her voice slicing through the air. "Not until accountability is served." Barnes swallowed hard, suddenly hyper-aware of how small the hallway felt, how exposed he was under the harsh lights. For the first time, he realized he wasn't the one in control anymore. And as Kiana watched from the floor, still hugging her books, she felt something stir inside her. Not just relief, but awe. For the first time in her life, she saw her mother not just as the woman who packed lunches and worked long hours, but as a force of justice, unshakable, undeniable. The stage was set. The walls of authority that once shielded men like Barnes were beginning to crack. And Monica was about to make sure they crumbled completely. Inside the principal's office, the air was heavy with the smell of stale coffee and disinfectant, the kind that lingered in schools long after cleaning crews left. The blinds were half-drawn, filtering slats of weak morning light across the room like prison bars. Kiana sat stiffly in one of the guest chairs, her backpack on her lap like a shield, while Monica stood behind her, tall and unflinching. Principal Hargrove shuffled papers unnecessarily, avoiding eye contact. His hands trembled as he folded and refolded them. Officer Barnes leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his jaw tight, but his smirk attempting to resurface, like a man clinging to the last thread of control. "Agent Johnson," the principal began, his voice too soft, too careful, "I'm sure we can work this out quietly. Emotions are high, but perhaps Kiana misunderstood Officer Barnes's intent." Monica's laugh was dry, sharp, and humorless. "Misunderstood? She's 14, not blind. She didn't misunderstand the feeling of a boot against her leg." Barnes leaned forward, his voice low and rough. "With all due respect, ma'am, you weren't here. Kids lie all the time. She was late. I corrected her, that's all." Kiana flinched at his tone, but Monica placed a steadying hand on her daughter's shoulder. Then she stepped forward, her eyes narrowing like a predator honing in. "Do you realize what you just admitted, officer? You called it correction, physical correction of a minor, in front of witnesses, in a public institution." Barnes's smirk wavered again. Principal Hargrove wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes darting between the two like he was trapped between a flame and a fuse. Let's not escalate. Officer Barnes has been part of this school for years. He has a clean record. Surely." Monica snapped her gaze to him. "And how many children had to misunderstand his corrections to keep that record clean? How many have been silenced because people like you preferred quiet over justice?" The principal's mouth opened, but no words came out. Silence hung thick. Even the wall clock seemed to tick louder, each second like a hammer on metal. Barnes finally pushed off the wall, trying to tower over Monica. "Look, lady." "Agent Johnson," she corrected, her voice cold as steel. "United States Secret Service. And you just put your hands on the wrong child." Barnes blinked, suddenly unsure, his tongue caught between excuses and defiance. Monica reached into her blazer pocket, pulled out her phone, and tapped the screen. A recording app blinked red. She had been recording since the hallway. The muffled sounds of Kiana's whisper, "He kicked me, Mom," echoed faintly from the speaker. The principal's eyes widened, Barnes's face drained of color. "You thought this would be swept under the rug," Monica said quietly, each word deliberate. "But the rug has been lifted, and now the whole country is going to see what's been hiding underneath." Barnes lunged forward as if to snatch the phone, but Monica's hand shot up like a wall, her body rooted and immovable. The sheer authority in her stance made him falter mid-step. "Try it," she whispered, her tone edged with fire. "And I will personally make sure you never see daylight without a courtroom escort again." Kiana stared at her mother with wide eyes, feeling something shift inside her. For the first time, fear was no longer the loudest voice in the room. The principal cleared his throat weakly. "Agent Johnson, please, let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." Monica turned her attention back to him, her voice rising now, steady and cutting like a blade. "It's already bigger, because it's not just about Kiana. It's about every child who walks through these doors, who deserves safety, respect, dignity. You tried to shield him with silence, but silence is complicity. Barnes's breathing grew shallow, his arrogance peeling away, layer by layer. His hands twitched near his belt, not for his weapon, but for something familiar, something to ground him. But the truth was clear. He was cornered, and he knew it. The storm was no longer brewing. It was here, crashing against every wall of authority that had once protected him. And Monica wasn't done yet. She was only getting started. Word spread faster than wildfire. By lunchtime, the entire school was buzzing. Students whispered in hallways, teachers exchanged glances in the faculty lounge, and parents' phones lit up with messages. Something happened with Officer Barnes. Monica Johnson is here. It's serious. By mid-afternoon, the school board chair, Mrs. Reynolds, arrived in a pressed navy suit flanked by 2 assistants. Her expression was tight, professional, and rehearsed, the kind of face that had weathered scandals before. She swept into the office with her heels clicking like gunshots on the tile, pausing only long enough to glance at Monica, then Barnes, then the principal. "Let's get one thing clear," she said briskly, dropping a leather folder onto the desk. "This school district values transparency, fairness, and the safety of its students. But we also value order. If we're going to handle this, we need to do it the right way, not with emotional outbursts or recordings taken out of context." Monica tilted her head, studying the woman. Her voice was calm, but underneath it was steel. Recordings don't take context out of context. They are context. Mrs. Reynolds' assistants shifted uncomfortably, exchanging nervous glances. Officer Barnes finally spoke, seizing the opening. His voice carried a false confidence, like a drowning man grabbing driftwood. "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. Finally, someone reasonable. This agent has been intimidating me since she walked in. She's trying to twist a simple disciplinary correction into a scandal." Kiana stiffened, whispering, "He's lying again, Mom." Monica placed her hand on her daughter's, steadying her. Then she turned to Mrs. Reynolds. "My daughter doesn't lie, and I have the recording to prove it. Would you like to hear?" The room tensed. The principal shifted in his seat, looking like he wanted to vanish. Mrs. Reynolds pressed her lips together. "Let's not jump to conclusions until we've reviewed everything. Officer Barnes has served this school faithfully for years. It's only fair we consider his record." Monica's eyes narrowed. His record or his protection? How many parents have complained before, only to be ignored? How many children went home carrying bruises and shame because this system decided his record was more important than their safety? The words hung heavy. For a moment, nobody dared to speak. Then the door creaked open. A voice from the hallway cut through the silence. "She's right!" Everyone turned. A mother stepped in, her son clutching her hand tightly. He looked no older than 12. His sleeve was pulled up just enough to reveal a faint yellow bruise near his elbow. The mother's eyes burned with restrained fury. "He did the same to my boy last year. We complained. Nothing happened." Another parent followed, then another. Soon, the office filled with murmurs, parents stepping forward, children peeking timidly from behind them. The dam had cracked. Stories began pouring out, whispers of Barnes shoving, berating, humiliating kids, always dismissed, always silenced. Barnes's face went pale. His voice, once commanding, now quivered with desperation. "They're exaggerating. They're piling on because they see me vulnerable. I've kept this place safe." Monica cut him off, her voice sharp as thunder. "Safe? You terrorized children. You turned safety into fear. That ends today." Kiana's heart pounded as she watched her mother transform the room. The once invincible officer now looked like a man on trial, his armor of authority shredded piece by piece. Mrs. Reynolds tried to regain control, raising her hands. "Please, everyone, this is not the place for—" Monica stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "This is exactly the place. For too long, it's been behind these closed doors where truth gets buried. But today, the truth walked in, and it won't be silenced again." Barnes opened his mouth to protest, but the sound of cameras clicking drowned him out. Local reporters had gathered outside, tipped off by a parent's call. The glass window of the office reflected their lenses flashing like lightning. The storm was no longer contained. It was breaking wide open. And in that moment, Monica knew the climax was coming, the point of no return. The office had turned into a pressure cooker, thick with anger, fear, and anticipation. Officer Barnes stood cornered, his uniform suddenly looking less like a badge of honor and more like a costume stripped of power. Parents filled the space, children's wide eyes peeking through the crowd, reporters pressing closer against the glass like sharks sensing blood in the water. The hum of whispers had grown into a storm, threatening to swallow him whole. For years, he had been the authority in these halls. His word was law, his presence unquestioned. Now that certainty was slipping through his fingers like sand. His face flushed crimson, his chest heaving with panic. He slammed his fist against the principal's desk, making everyone flinch. "Enough!" he barked, his voice cracking under the strain. "This is a circus. You're all ganging up on me because I dared to enforce discipline. You think you can ruin my career with one video? With baseless accusations from ungrateful parents?" His eyes darted toward Monica, wild and venomous. You orchestrated this. You waltz in here with your fancy badge and think you can tear down everything I built. You don't know what it's like to keep these kids in line. Without me, this school would be chaos." Monica didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her heels steady against the tile, her presence towering over his crumbling facade. Her voice cut through his rant like a blade. "Chaos isn't children walking these halls. Chaos is a man in uniform abusing the very kids he's sworn to protect. Chaos is silence bought with fear, and that ends today." Barnes's hand twitched toward his belt instinctively, brushing the radio clipped there, a move more out of habit than necessity, but in the charged atmosphere it carried weight. Parents recoiled, pulling their children closer. Gasps rippled through the room. Monica locked eyes with him, unshaken. "Don't," she said firmly, her voice low, but carrying enough power to freeze him mid-motion. "That badge isn't a weapon. Not anymore. If you think you can intimidate me the way you intimidate children, you chose the wrong woman." Kiana, watching, felt her throat tighten. She had never seen her mother so fierce, so unbreakable. To her, Monica had always been Mom, warm, protective, steady. But now, she was something more, a force of nature, standing against the storm. Barnes, realizing his grasp on authority was slipping for good, turned desperate. He tried to appeal to the room, his voice trembling. "Listen to me. I've given this school my life. I've protected your kids from gangs, from drugs, from danger you'll never understand. And this is how I'm repaid? By being called a monster? His eyes darted wildly. You need me. Without me, your kids are targets. Don't let her destroy me. But the parents weren't moved. One by one, voices rose. You shoved my son into a locker. You called my daughter trash. You left my boy crying on the ground while you laughed. Each accusation was a nail in the coffin. Barnes staggered under the weight of their words, his defense unraveling in real time. Finally, Monica pulled out her phone and, without hesitation, hit play. The audio filled the office. Barnes's voice sharp and cruel, the sound of Kiana's pain, the crack of the kick echoing like a gunshot. The room went silent except for the playback, each second more damning than the last. When it ended, the silence was suffocating. Barnes's lips parted, but no words came. The power he once held in his voice was gone. All that remained was the hollow rasp of a man exposed. Then Monica leaned in close, her words for him, but loud enough for everyone to hear. You kicked my daughter. You tried to break her spirit, and you thought no one would stand up to you. Well, here we are. Your reign of fear is over. The children you bullied, they will heal. But you will carry this shame for the rest of your life. Barnes's knees buckled. For a moment, it looked like he might collapse. His hand clutched the desk for support, his face ashen, sweat trickling down his temple. Reporters outside caught every detail through their lenses, the once dominant officer reduced to a trembling figure, begging the world with his eyes for mercy. Finally, he cracked. His voice, stripped of arrogance, came out hoarse and broken. Please, don't end me like this. I have a family, a career. I made a mistake. The words hung in the air, an officer who had once wielded fear now begging for mercy from the very people he had terrorized. Monica stared at him, her jaw tight. Mercy is for those who show remorse before they're caught. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got exposed. And you should be. The school board chair, Mrs. Reynolds, looked shaken, her polished exterior cracking. For the first time, she addressed the crowd with humility. This will be reviewed immediately. Officer Barnes will be placed on leave effective now, pending an investigation. Barnes's head snapped toward her, betrayal etched on his face. You can't do this to me. You promised to protect me. But his words drowned under the roar of voices, parents cheering, children clapping, reporters shouting questions. Monica placed an arm around Kiana, pulling her close. In that moment, the power had shifted entirely. No longer was Barnes the authority figure towering over children. He was a man stripped bare, his abuses laid open for all to see. Kiana whispered, her voice trembling but sure, Mom, you did it. You stopped him. Monica kissed her daughter's forehead gently. No, baby, we did it. The truth did it. Outside, cameras captured Barnes being escorted away, his once commanding stride replaced by a shuffle of defeat. The image would spread across headlines by nightfall. Racist cop exposed by black mother and daughter, begs for mercy. And for the first time in years, the halls of that school felt lighter. But Monica knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of something much bigger. The sirens outside had faded, leaving behind an eerie quiet that seemed almost impossible after the storm of voices, shouts, and gasps that had filled the school. The office, once suffocating with tension, now felt hollow, stripped of the authority Barnes had clung to like armor. His empty chair sat in the corner like a relic of an era that had finally come crashing down. Kiana held her mother's hand tightly, her small palm damp against Monica's. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to exhale. The fear that had wrapped itself around her chest like chains was loosening. Still, she couldn't erase the memory, Barnes's boot slamming against her side, the laughter in his voice, the hopelessness she had felt. But now, looking at her mother, the way Monica had stood tall, unyielding, commanding respect with nothing but truth, Kiana felt something else stirring inside her. Pride. Parents began filing out of the office, murmurs of gratitude passing toward Monica as they went. "Thank you for standing up. You gave us courage. We should have spoken sooner." Each phrase chipped away at the isolation Monica had felt when she first stormed into that school. She wasn't alone. She never had been. A young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, his voice carrying in the hallway. "Mama, does this mean he won't hurt us anymore?" The mother bent down, tears welling in her eyes. "No, baby, not anymore." Monica caught the exchange and felt her throat tighten. This wasn't just about her daughter. This was about every child who had been forced to swallow their fear, to bow their head, to accept humiliation because no one dared to challenge the man in uniform. Principal Davis, who had been a silent figure in the corner for most of the confrontation, finally stepped forward, his voice heavy with guilt. "Mrs. Carter, I owe you and your daughter an apology. I thought I was protecting this school by keeping quiet, by letting Barnes handle discipline his way. But all I did was enable cruelty. I see that now." Monica's gaze was sharp, but not cruel. "Seeing is only the first step, Mr. Davis. The question is, what will you do next?" The principal swallowed hard. "Whatever it takes to make this right, to rebuild trust, to ensure every child here feels safe, not scared." Monica nodded. She didn't need promises. She needed actions. Time would tell if he followed through. By the time she and Kiana stepped out of the school, the evening sky was bruised with shades of purple and gold. The reporters swarmed instantly, microphones extended, cameras flashing. "Mrs. Carter, how does it feel to expose Officer Barnes? Do you believe justice will be served? What message do you have for other parents?" Monica held her daughter close, shielding her from the frenzy. Her voice was steady, calm, but carried the weight of the entire community. "My message is simple. Never let fear silence you. Bullies in uniforms are still bullies. And when they target our children, it is our duty, as parents, as neighbors, as human beings, to stand up and say, 'No more.' This isn't just about my daughter. This is about every child who deserves to walk into school and feel safe, not hunted." The words rippled through the crowd, more powerful than any soundbite could capture. Even the reporters, trained to chase drama, paused, realizing they weren't just covering a scandal. They were witnessing a moment. That night, Monica and Kiana sat on their couch, exhaustion finally catching up with them. The glow of the television filled the room, their own faces replaying on the evening news. Racist cop removed from school after brutal abuse exposed by student and mother. Headlines scrolled across the screen, each one sharper than the last. Kiana leaned against her mother, whispering, "Mom, do you think kids will hate me for this? For speaking out?" Monica brushed her daughter's hair gently. "Baby, some might. Some people are afraid of the truth because it forces them to look in the mirror. But others will see you as brave. You showed the world that even when someone tries to break you, you can rise stronger. And that matters more than their hate." Tears welled in Kiana's eyes, but this time they weren't from pain, they were from relief. She wasn't broken. She wasn't small. She was seen. Over the next days, the ripple spread. Parents demanded change. Petitions circulated. School board meetings overflowed with voices that had once been silent. Community members who had never stepped into the school suddenly stood shoulder to shoulder, demanding justice not only for Kiana, but for every child scarred by Barnes's cruelty. The system moved slowly. Investigations, hearings, procedural hurdles, but the tide had shifted. Barnes was no longer the untouchable enforcer. He was the disgraced officer, his face splashed across headlines, his name synonymous with abuse. The image of him begging for mercy in that school office replayed endlessly, a haunting reminder of how quickly power can crumble when confronted by truth. For Monica, it wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming dignity. She wasn't naive. She knew the fight against systemic abuse didn't end with one man losing his badge. But she also knew every victory mattered. Every voice that rose up chipped away at the walls of silence. One evening, as Monica tucked Kiana into bed, her daughter asked softly, "Mom, do you think he'll ever say sorry?" Monica sat on the edge of the bed, her heart aching at the question. "Maybe one day, but we don't need his sorry to heal. We already took back our power, and no one can take that from us." Kiana nodded, her eyes heavy with sleep, comforted by the certainty in her mother's voice. Weeks later, when Monica walked through the school halls again, the atmosphere had changed. The air was lighter. Children's laughter filled the corridors without the undercurrent of fear. Teachers smiled more easily. Even the walls seemed less oppressive, as though the building itself had shed a weight it had carried for too long. Parents approached Monica, some with gratitude, others with shame for not speaking sooner. She didn't judge them. Change often begins with one voice, but it spreads when others join in. And as she stood watching her daughter walk confidently into her classroom, Monica knew this wasn't just Kiana's victory. It was a story that would outlive them both, whispered in classrooms, retold in living rooms, shared online as a testament. That truth can disarm power, that courage can topple fear, that justice, even if delayed, can arrive with thunder. The camera would fade here, lingering on Monica's face as she watched her daughter disappear through the doorway, pride softening her features. A quiet smile tugged at her lips, a silent vow in her heart. To keep fighting, to keep protecting, to keep believing. And then the narrator's voice, solemn and stirring, would close the story. In a world where silence has too often protected the powerful, one mother's refusal to bow changed everything. Officer Barnes thought his badge made him untouchable, but he forgot the power of truth. He forgot the strength of a mother's love. And in the end, it wasn't his authority that defined him. It was his downfall. So I ask you, how many more stories like Kiana's go unheard every day? And how many more could be changed if we found the courage to speak? If this story moved you, share it. Speak it. Because silence is the soil where injustice grows. And voices like yours are the light that breaks it apart. The screen would fade to black. The final text would appear. Acts of depth.